Hello, everyone. Welcome to our next class in the Uranus series. Today we're learning about Uranus in the seventh house. So here are some beautiful images Kristin found. We have a group of friends sitting around the table. They're all kind and inclusive and loving towards one another. This was a spontaneous picture that wasn't staged. And wow, so wonderful that it was taken. I'm joking, of course. And here's another really beautiful. You could actually go to Google interspecies friendship, and you'll find all these really cool images of unlikely friends. What we're trying to depict with these images is just the nature, of course, Uranus being friendship in general, but in the seventh house, there's a particular quality of acceptance for one another according to our individuality, according to who we are. In the seventh house, there's just your needs, the things that come with who you are on this soul journey. And then when we come into a relationship, we learn how to listen. What is it you need? How can I meet your needs? How can I ask for what I need? And Uranus is always about a greater threshold of inclusivity and community, rooted in this universal principle of sharing and inclusion. When you see images of, whether it's human beings or animals, unlikely relationships, it's so beautiful. It's people from different walks of life, or animals that are just in totally different places on the food chain, coming together and say, hey, I can be your friend too. We can take care of each other. We can learn how to listen to each other. It's such a beautiful example of Uranus in Libra. So thank you for these images, Kristin. Let's introduce Uranus in the seventh house or in Libra. So once again, the archetype of seventh house Libra corresponds to relationship. Relationships by their very nature are conditional, meaning they're specific to context. The relationship that I have with my partner, my intimate partner, or my daughter will be different than the relationship that I have with my colleague or the person that I'm studying with or my student. Every single relationship, according to its nature, has a different parameter to it, has a different reality to it. And there's nothing right or wrong about it. Just simply, I'm going to treat my daughter and have a different relationship to her than I do to my partner. And all of these relationships at the core then reflect the specific dynamics between two souls on their own soul journey, how we're coming together, learning how to listen and share and engage relationship in a way that meets and supports each person's individual needs. So a core archetype within that seventh house Libra archetype is that of listening. Listening and communication. Jeffrey Wolfe Green spoke about the Libra Venus archetype as the psychology of listening. Are you hearing me? Are you really listening to me? There's an active, engaged interest in knowing not who another person is in their true self, because that really would be more of a Neptunian Pisces, like unconditional love. I don't have to even know your name to love you. But this is more of an active interest in who are you in a very human relative sense. What do you need to be heard? What are your needs? What do you want to express? And just the experience of being listened to induces within a soul a sense of, oh, I'm loved and accepted for who I am now. Not some sort of abstract experience of acceptance, but a very personal, my own personal human experience. My needs and my feelings are appreciated. They're heard. They matter here. And so the energetics of listening really allows for two souls to not just get to know each other, but it allows for a conscious exchange of sharing and support and care and connection and giving and receiving. And yet there are some relationships where, of course, the way in which we're listening or the way in which we're available for sharing and giving is going to be different than in other relationships. You go and you buy food at the store. it's not necessarily going to be the right time for a deep, intimate, open conversation with the person at the register who's checking out your food. And this is the Libra 7th house square to Capricorn 10th house. According to the times, parameters, the roles, the context, the purpose, the boundaries that are relevant to our own life, every relationship has its own place and its own purpose. If you're in a class or in a classroom environment, that might not be the right moment or the right time to emotionally process deeper content. But if you're in a container with another soul where there's consent and there's the right kind of container for that, that might be a good time to really allow yourself to be heard and to process deeper content in you. So there's a very dynamic reality to the 7th house and Libra that encompasses both the great diversity, air sign, of relationships and all the forms and expressions it takes, and the ways in which each relationship will allow for a certain quality of giving and sharing and receiving. And then there's also, within the context of each relationship, how we are listening, we're expressing ourselves, we're learning to hear the other, and we're determining what we can give, what we cannot give. And that's where Jeffrey Wolfe Green Austin said, sometimes the greatest giving is by saying no, is in not giving, not being available. And really knowing how to establish the right kinds of expectations. Expectations are a useful and relevant and natural part of life. And expectations say, I'm expecting that you're going to show up for me in this way. I have an expectation with Kristin right now that we're going to do this thing together. We're going to hold this container. We're going to be relating and in relationship with one another in a particular way. It's a very solid and natural and normal expectation, but that was set. It comes with the agreement of us deciding to do the work that we're doing together. Expectations are very specific to the nature of each relationship and the parameters and agreements that have been set. And so there are particular expectations that allow for a certain trust and giving and sharing to occur within each relationship. And thus we can say in the 7th house Libra realm, oftentimes we're dealing with created expectations that says, I need you to act a certain way. I need you to be this for me. But there isn't actual relationship, meaning there wasn't ever a state of, this is how we're choosing to be together. We can project our own needs or our unresolved dynamics and expect other people to be certain things for us. So the healing and sort of the gem, the wisdom, the beauty of that Libra 7th house archetype is, and I always use this term, conscious relating. Conscious relating says, I'm a whole sovereign being. You are a whole sovereign being. How are we choosing consciously to be in relationship with one another? Is there agreement here? Is there consent? Are we both consciously present to this? You don't have to do that with a child because there's a sort of understood soul agreement for the parent-child dynamic, right? You don't have to do that with the cashier because there's a sort of understood soul agreement for what the cashier checkout purchaser relationship is. So there are certain facets of life where it's sort of understood according to just the nature of the relationship inherently. And then there are many relationships where that learning of intimacy, of listening, of coming to understand, where can I expect you to show up? What can I give? That's a big part of the growth within Libra 7th house. Anything you want to add to this introduction?
Absolutely. So you mentioned one of my favorite Jeffrey Wolfe Green.
I think I've heard you say it the most.
Because I will say it again, because it is one of my own lessons that, well, it's about when to give and when not to give, and who to give to and who not to give to, and how much to give and how much not to. It is that balancing act. So within that, it's understanding that some forms of giving are, like you said, to say no. Saying no can be a supreme form of giving because you're helping another help themselves. Right. And I've learned this in spades. Wanting to say yes because I think that person wants me to say yes, but inside I don't want to say yes. I want to say no. And so honoring no, and then the reality that creates. And if you have a giving nature, and I've got both relationship planets, Mars and Venus, in Capricorn in the 7th house, there's this feeling of obligation, that if somebody needs something from me, I'm definitely a girl who can't say no. There's a song on Broadway. I'm just a girl who can't say no. I mean, if you really have a need. But I've learned, even just being raised in a family where there was so much expectation and, feeling obligated, like to do things at church and everywhere else. It was something that I really had to unravel. So by appearing not to give at times, you are practicing the art of supreme giving.
That's the quote. Yeah.
By appearing not to give
Appearing.
at times. You're appearing not to give, but you're actually giving. It is a supreme form of giving. Really, and I can tell you, when I'm talking to clients and I can see that strong Libra signature, it is like the greatest exhale ever. I can feel from them. Just, if they know, and again, this is not across the board, right? But if they know that by removing that energy, they're actually helping the situation, not enabling, but really helping, it is such a relief, because there's so much conditioning that we've all been, impacted by. Another thing I will add, really separate to this, the giving and the sharing, that is such a Libra expression, is that you talked about all the different relationships that we have in our life. You're going to treat somebody differently depending on who they are. But also when you're learning about yourself, Uranus in Libra, Uranus in the 7th house, you need a diversity of unique relationships in order to evaluate your own sense of individuality. And this occurs through comparing and contrasting, right? You're comparing yourself to another, necessarily so, and contrasting. Is this something I value? Is this something that I'm aligned with? And so it's important. And so these types of souls might have many relationships that can start and stop very quickly, very spontaneously. They can be longer, they can be shorter, they can, come and go. You can be completely intimate or completely detached. There's this swinging extreme that happens with Uranus in this position. Also, Uranus in Libra or the 7th has to do with the phenomena of human relationships and literally how people treat one another. The phenomena of how men treat women in, an Eastern country, right? Or how we treat people from another race in any country, how humans treat one another is Uranus in Libra. So if you see that, a soul absolutely could be very much a part of a culture where, groups of people are being traumatized for being different. Even in this country, in terms of, I think about gay marriages and when they've come to be in different states, they've recognized them as a legal marriage. And there's many states that don't. Right now, we have a Supreme Court that wants to, get rid of that altogether. So there's this, a lot of extreme situations like that. And I would say too, with Uranus and Libra, Uranus in the 7th, you could be a soul that needs and wants to explore a diversity of relationships in terms of sexuality as well. Maybe you're straight, maybe you're gay, maybe you're bi, but anything goes and everything's okay. No judgment. It depends on your stage of evolution for that last comment, but you know what I mean? That's all part of it as well.
Great. So really continuing with this Uranus theme, we want to think about, what are we liberating from? Anywhere where we have Uranus, there is an accessing of our essential nature, our essential individuality. So we're going to kind of flesh out what's the unique trauma imprint here, and what are we liberating? So you already kind of said it. It's this piece of, I don't accept you for who you are. I need you to be different. I need you to fit into these social or cultural boxes that I'm comfortable with. And this can be showing up in a relationship where one person's needs are simply not understood or met or appreciated or recognized by the other. I need you to fit this box of relationship. What's interesting with Uranus in the seventh or in Libra, this can go in both directions. Right? We could have a soul with Uranus in the signature who they themselves are the conformist. Right? I needed to look this way. And actually, due to the trauma of rejection, of not being accepted or included, they may have associated in their mind an ideal of relationship. We get together, we listen to each other, we share with each other. These are the things that we do together, and it's all a construct in the mind that they've created that creates an idea of togetherness and friendship, but it's completely, it's empty. It's almost like you put on the shirt with a little logo and you're a part of the club and everyone else in the club wears the same shirt, but there's no meaning in it. But it creates this like very superficial sense of, oh yeah, we're a partner, we're a team, or yeah, we're really good friends, we coordinate our clothing together. These are the things that we do, but it's not actual friendship. It's trying to conform to a standard. So one can exhibit that oneself, or one's partner can be trying to enforce that. And the realization fundamentally, whatever direction it's going, is none of that is true relationship. That's all. It's just a thought. It's a thought. We say, here's a thought that I have of what relationship is. Now let's try to be that thought. And so there's a liberation that happens here that can be incredibly unsettling. There can be an immense amount of anxiousness because it comes back down to, if I am not trying to pigeonhole and define the parameters of what relationship is or what it looks like, either one, you're going to reject me, I'm not going to be wanted anymore, or two, I'm going to be in this ancient insecure place. Am I actually going to ever be wanted or loved or appreciated? To actually embrace the unknown. What does the unknown say? The unknown in this case brings us to the present moment edge of listening. I'm not going to try to define what this relationship is or what its purpose is. I'm going to listen to what it is. I'm going to listen to you. And Libra has that quality of inner and outer listening. It's a very engaged internal process. We're feeling our feelings. How does that feel for me? Do I like that? Oh, no. Or I tried that and actually I realized it doesn't feel good to me. That's what you're speaking about with exploring extremes and a diversity of relationships and experiences. This is how we learn through Libra. Actually, we come to find ourselves through that comparison and contrast. So that inner feeling state is an inner listening, and also being able to listen to others. This is where relationships can manifest in one's life, where relationships are actually about friendship. Mm-hmm. And friendship doesn't sound very sexy or romantic or exciting, but if you think about it, it's kind of the highest ideal. Because friendship says, I'm actively interested in honoring and loving and accepting and supporting who you are. And I don't need you to be other than that, but I'm your ally. I'm on your team. And actually, that's really cool. Whereas many other relationship dynamics we can be liberating from with Uranus are all these conditioned constructs of what it means to be in a relationship. Now, this is not just intimate partnership. Seventh house Libra is all relationships. So we can find ourselves really bringing this out in our life in a way where we realize that the true nature of every single person is not partner, mother, father, daughter, son, colleague, is friend. As souls, we are all friends. And we're taking these different forms and in relative ways, engaging and dancing in different ways, but take that away, we're all just equals as souls. And it's a very beautiful, liberating place. And that's why, of course, we have these concepts of open relation. And it's not about open relationship or non-traditional forms of relationship inherently. That might happen. It's more about what happens when we free the mind from conditioning. There's a space for allowing what is truly of benefit for each individual needs to emerge and become self-evident. So it's more about freedom from any existing decision about what relationship should be or should look like.
Exactly. That was excellent. Yeah, I wanted to share another aspect of Uranus and Libra in the seventh house, because we talked before about the fact that Uranus connects to trauma, unresolved trauma. And let's just say hypothetically, you've had some trauma in a relationship before. You were left at the altar, or somebody said and broke up with you without you were expecting it. You weren't expecting it at all. And so there's this maybe nervousness around that, and anticipation and stress that you carry, because you don't really know if the next person's going to do the same thing. And so this is another Libra word here, project the past onto this new relationship. So it's very important, if you have this signature, that you're not projecting the past onto the person that you're with now. And so liberation from the projection is part of what the evolution looks like. You're recognizing that this is brand new. This is something different and new. And hopefully you're attracting this next soul because you've evolved out of something else that was not healthy for you. So projection as a result of trauma from the past is part of this dynamic.
And in that trauma, there can have been this dynamic, partner suddenly leaving, right? So this trauma of rejection, just as much as oneself suddenly leaving. So there can be this dissociative pattern of getting into relationship with people that just can't get you. And maybe one has conformed themselves to standards and a way of being and a giving and a sharing and expectations that aren't natural, that aren't right for that soul. Very common Uranian experience is there's suppression, which is like a building pressure that will lead to a moment where that soul will actually just get up and go. Just break. I'm done. I'm over this.
Exactly.
And that actually creates a particular quality of unresolved karma, meaning there's an unresolved dynamic in that, which will lead the soul to recreate such experiences because there's no liberation in that.
Yeah.
There can also be real issues with true intimacy, with closeness, because of that projection. Are you gonna reject me? Like to really be oneself, there can be this paranoia or projection of not really going to be listened to. Or I know how to be something else for others, but I don't really feel like I can just be myself. But the calling is just to be yourself and to find out this Uranus teaching, the universe is friendly. You're safe to be yourself.
Yeah.
The trauma that you're anticipating is the trauma you will experience, but it's actually, when we really get it, it's in the mind. And what happens in the other person is impersonal. It's only going to elicit existing trauma within you, but there's nothing personal happening here. That is a powerful, essential realization for Uranus in this signature.
Yeah.
All right. Should we look at some examples? Anything else to speak to?
I just wanted to add, like, that cardinal square is so powerful. It just shows up in so many ways. We talk about the fact that we evolved through the emotional body, which is the first of the four cardinal, the Cancer. So as you're talking about with the Libra archetype, when there's repressed emotion, right, through the Capricorn square on the other side, when you repress the emotion, Cancer, what happens is like that submerging of the beach ball underwater, and the anger, and that's it, I'm done. And you can see it through this cardinal square when you're not allowing those emotions to be expressed in a healthy way. And so, it's a great way to understand when you have anger coming up, if you don't feel like you're being heard, or you're not processing your own emotions naturally. Are you suppressing something? Are you resisting? Are you guarding? Because by guarding, you're not allowing the full breadth of who you are to come out. You're not allowing your signal, your true signal, to be experienced by somebody. So then there becomes cross currents in your energy, right? And things just start darting in different directions. And then there's a reactiveness that you might have. And then of course the partner will have it. Cross currents is a huge, example of, Uranus and Gemini, I would say, through that Libra archetype, that the air trine, because Gemini is being like two different people at once in a sense. And the cross currents would be the Uranus piece, which, when that happens, then the relationship is really not going to be able to be sustained. Somebody needs to know that you're all there. And in order to have a healthy relationship, you have to be all there. that in a Cancer way, in order for, you know, for the relationship to be clear and understood, and allowed to evolve. That's just, anytime there's detachment, or anytime there's this distance or fear or coolness, it just doesn't have a long shelf life. It's just impossible. It's impossible. At some point, it just dries up and it's done. So,
Good.
all right.
Okay, so let's look at some examples. Yeah, that coolness and that distance is a really great point too. There can be this profound sense of inaccessibility, like, what are you feeling? What's
Yeah.
going
Where
on
are
with
you?
you? Yeah,
Hello.
all right, yeah.
It's like, are you there? I mean, even in intimacy, I've heard, it's almost like they're not in their body. People talk about, I feel like they're not even there. Or someone who has that signature talks about, I feel like I'm watching myself while I'm intimate with my partner. I'm not in my body, and there's a reason for that. Usually it's trauma. Okay.
Okay, Jennifer Aniston, you take it.
This is my pick because I loved, in the 90s when Friends all started, I was in my 20s. I could totally relate to these people at that time. This is before I was getting into this work, it was just like anybody else, wanting to have fun with my friends and laughing a lot. And I mean, this sitcom went on for 10 years. And then when I had kids, my kids were watching it. I mean, it's just been going on and on forever. So Friends is a Uranian term, right? And one of the, well, America's sweetheart on this show, of course, is Jennifer Aniston. I mean, she's just, like the girl next door. Everybody loves her. She's a beautiful girl and a very funny actress. And she's got Uranus in Libra retrograde, conjunct the South Node in the 12th house with Jupiter. And Jupiter rules her moon in Sag. So, of course, she's hysterical. I mean, it's such a perfect chart for this. But something I wanted to share about this show is that whenever we talk about the 12th house, we've talked about this before, or you really gone into depth, I think, about the fame or what can happen with that 12th house. Like, it's just like way beyond anyone could ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we think about things happening suddenly, right? Boom. And the original contract for Friends, each one of the friends, they all made the same amount of money. The agreement was they didn't want any one person to stand out. They wanted everybody to be equal, right? Everyone had their own character, own role, but everything was equal. The way they went about their contracts was a group. And I loved that. Uranus. Everything was fair and divided equally. The first episode, $1,600 per episode, they earned. By the third season, the cast threatened to go on strike, Uranus, and unless they received pay increases, which resulted in $100,000 per episode. So it went from $1,600 per episode to $100,000 per episode. And then by the sixth season, they were making $750,000 per episode. And by the 9th and 10th season, their final season, it was $1 million per episode. So, wow, that's big. That's relatively fast, I would say. And so anyway, of course, if you're famous, you're going to be in the tabloids all the time. And I think it was in 2000, she married Brad Pitt, of course, another very famous star in Hollywood. And also they were just, that perfect looking couple, so to speak. But that relationship only lasted 5 years. In fact, 2005, they divorced, and 10 years later, it was 10 years before she married again. And it was only for 2 years. I think it's Justin Theroux, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. So that was 2017. And that was now 5 years ago that ended. And of course, we hear about different relationships he's had here and there, like John Mayer, who, I don't know, whenever I see him playing his music, he seems completely detached himself and in his head and all of that. So, and it's been necessary for her, I think, to really experience herself in all these different ways, whether it's a marriage or, quick, it's fun and done and moving on. But she's also always talked about the fact that her friends mean everything to her. I mean, her friends in general mean everything to her. So, and she's definitely been married very much to her work, I would say. And anyway, I love this example. She does have a sun in Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus in the fourth. Mercury is there as well in Aquarius. And, oftentimes when I see this with the sun squaring Mars, squaring Neptune, people aren't necessarily even going to have their own children, which she has not had. And, really it's about nurturing themselves. And in this case, it's been nurturing her dream, I guess, just to be out there in the world and on stage in the way that she does. So do you have any thoughts or comments about this chart?
Yeah,
You're
found a great quote.
yawning.
I'm yawning because I have a toddler that won't sleep. I'm
Oh,
interested in finding a fantastic partner. This is a more recent quote after the last divorce. I'm interested in finding a fantastic partner and just living an enjoyable life and having fun with one another. That's all we should hope for. It doesn't have to be etched in stone in legal documents.
mhm.
I thought that was a beautiful expression
Yeah,
of this Libra Uranus in the 12th.
exactly.
What like the vibe that I get is I enjoy being with you. I love you for who you are. This is delightful. It's not trying to give it more meaning than it actually has. And it's, makes a lot of sense too. That Sag moon in the second house squaring the nodes and that, ruled by that Jupiter in Libra. She does in fact need a lot of space and independence. And that's clearly a core soul piece she's working out with that nodal dynamic with that Aries sixth house and Libra, not wanting to get sucked into some kind of reality of relationship that's really not her indigenous way. And that North Node Venus conjunction, Venus ruling all that Libra, really this cultivation of discernment. What's my path? What's my work? What am I doing? That's what's really important to me. And not wanting relationship to become unnecessarily, to occupy more space than it needs to by making it something that it's not. So we can see that search for freedom and authenticity is a really big piece for her.
I'd also add, though, in terms of her evolution, that too much freedom is overrated because the Mars is in Scorpio, balsamic to Neptune. It rules her North Node, it rules her Saturn, it rules her seventh house. She secretly really wants to go deep with someone, but it scares the shit out of her. Sorry. There's this I don't want to be vulnerable kind of feeling or abandoned or anything else. If I maintain my independence, I'll be fine, relative independence. And so I think it's really more of, of course, having fun is a facade. I know I've been close to very funny people and they'll tell you the same thing privately. Of course, they want something deep and intimate and something I can trust with my whole soul and my whole life. That's what she really wants secretly.
Interesting.
So, I do feel that she's just been burned too many times, or she can't trust maybe the bottom and the deepest part of that experience, not the bottom in a negative way, the depth, the true depth. She can't trust it. When she's lost herself in a relationship, South Node in Libra in the seventh house, that rug got pulled out beneath her. I think that was I think Brad Pitt was an example of that. I think she was totally in love with the guy. So anyway, it's all about evolution. So of course she wants to have fun, but she wants to be able, and she wants it to be a friend first. Of course, you got to have that best friend and a partner, but she does want to go, she wants to evolve through that relationship. And that means absolute trust and limit pushing for sure.
That's a good point. Good observation. All right. In contrast.
Yeah. One size does not fit all.
What we found interesting about this, of course, is it's the same signature. It's Libra, Uranus and Libra in the 12th house, but in a completely different way. So this Libra Uranus squares the nose. And this is an example of where we can find Uranus in Libra and 12 specifically manifesting as an overt exclusivity, not inclusivity. This is the outright rejection. Uranus can also correspond to scapegoating, and Uranus in the 12th in general can really correspond to large groups of people all bulked together. And you wouldn't expect something so dark and evil with Libra, but this is where you really need to apply this to this whole context. The trauma of Uranus and Libra in the 12th house is here's an entire group of people that we're going to, relative to this third house, ninth house axis, we're going to determine as an inferior race. We are scapegoating and putting this projection, Libra, onto an entire culture, onto an entire race of people, onto an entire community of people, and saying these people are the reasons for all of our problems. These people are the issue. And how it's very easy to become Libra 12th house, the facade, the illusion of being very likable. Here's a very balanced and reasonable solution. The fact that what he created actually became a whole, how do I say this? Uranus will always speak to groups of people that form together because they share a similar perspective or similar intelligence, a similar vibration. So the existing racism, hatred, the interesting communism itself is a Uranian concept. The gathering together on the basis of sharing a similar fear, a similar hatred, bringing something out that existed in the collective and saying, hey, this is something we all share. Let's create a community. Let's create the Nazi party. And we can all be honest about hating people that are different than us. And that's the thing with Libra. It also reminds me, we should look up Martin Buber's chart of the I-thou relationship. Every relationship is either an it or a thou. You're either an it, which is I'm putting you in a projected box, which is a very Libra thing. I've decided what you are, and I've created that construct, or a thou. I'm actually in relationship to the you-ness of you, to you. This is creating an it out of a whole group of people and forming community around a shared hatred and racism and cultural alienation that was then scapegoated on Jewish people and minorities in general. Being square in the nodes, it's a very powerful dynamic. We have the power of the South node here, of course, ruled by that dictator, Leo, 10th house, needing to be the ruler, needing to be in charge, having influence through what word, spoken word. He wrote a book. He was very influential. Jupiter on the South node with his word carried a lot of authority and power. And the moon itself is on the South node as the ruler of that North node. So it's like the way he formulated and shaped his thoughts and actually gained social credibility through his philosophy, through his ideas, that was able to rally groups of people in a mindset of togetherness. That's the distortion of this. So this is a very good example of how not just Uranus can reflect how one has experienced trauma, but how one can create trauma. In this case, this is massive endemic trauma. This is trauma for entire groups of people. Anything in the 12th house with the outer planets in general can very much speak to collective dynamics that happen to all people, indiscriminate of, anyone that was not white Christian, right? It's like, it's just collective. So groups of people experiencing this collective trauma. I've actually worked with a lot of charts of souls that have had memories of, being gassed in a gas chamber and having been a part of the Holocaust with Uranus in the 12th house. It really elicits this imagery of being in an environment, in a chamber with a lot of people. You can't tell who's who. You're all shaved. No one's wearing any clothing. Your individuality is stripped away, and you're just grouped into this collective mass. And everyone is the same. Everyone is being persecuted. Everyone is being killed. Everyone's going to be annihilated. You're all sharing in this one collective reality, and it's a very Uranian 12th house thing. And having memories of that, whether or not the soul actually experienced that in the past life, these kinds of things are in the collective.
Totally.
Within the field of all of our ancestry, practically everyone's as well.
Exactly. It's so interesting. We talk a lot in EA, of course, about one of the foundational principles and things that we address is the skip step. And so, Uranus squaring the nodes is squaring a South node in Capricorn and North node in Cancer is that extreme judgment of other people. As I said earlier in the show, Uranus and Libra are the 7th is how we treat one another. How do we treat? And we're going back to that cardinal axis, which is so intense. That cardinal axis is huge. just in terms of, as souls having a human experience, our emotional body is everything. How a soul experiences being human in the body, and how we're treated, how that affects us emotionally, and the judgment, that comes, a trauma as a result of that. So of course, this is not the first life he's been doing this.
Yeah.
It's not the first life at all. So yeah, an absolute extreme. And it's feeling, at least in this country, it's already, I'm feeling that, the white nationalistic kind of energy that's been growing in this country. So it's, the furthest thing from balance that we want to be, right?
Yeah. It's interesting to note he was also a lot of the basis for what he put out there in terms of rallying the people and convincing the people is based on his idea of science, right? These pseudoscientific ideas and notions. And there's a lot of work being done by Nazis around, I don't know what the name of this was or what it was called. Being able to actually determine, certain races are superior, or here's why these races are not. Like actually trying to bring some kind of scientific, and this is the very nature of Uranus and Libra. It's which is an interesting contrast to the next charts that we're going to look at. It's trying to create a typology of people. Here is your type according to these scientific standards, but it can be a total projection of the mind. And in general, it's useful to understand Libra, which we generally think of as all about giving and listening and sharing, and maybe there's a tendency to think of Libra more as like the people pleaser, and it could be. Libra, relative to its square with Capricorn, can be incredibly judgmental and incredibly unskilled at true intimacy and true listening. Just offering that perspective as well. All right. So the next two charts, we're going to look at Freud and Jung together. I'm not specifically analyzing their charts very deeply, but I'm just pointing out they both have Uranus in the 7th house. So Freud has Uranus Sun conjunctions. This was his life purpose. You can say revolutionizing a scientific basis for relationship. And he brought forth many concepts, including the ego. Like there's certain concepts and ideas that he brought forward in terms of understanding personality types and personality development that are actually quite revolutionary and profound that we often overlook. Like his contribution to our understanding of human psychology, and more than just human psychology, our capacity to understand the nature of the human personality itself. 7th house being persona. In fact, the person who I think coined the idea of anima and animus, which is very much a 7th house archetype, was Jung, who originally studied and is sort of the predecessor to Freud, as I understand it. So he as well has Uranus in Leo in the 7th house. I know more about Jung than I do Freud, so I can maybe spend a little more time with him. He was an astrologer too. He made an amazing contribution in terms of revolutionizing and evolving the field of counseling and really understanding human psychology, human development, human personalities. So you can think of Uranus in the 7th in general as the ability to objectively understand the subjective nature of the individual. And I think that's a Jungian quote. In some like I'm sort of quoting him. Like there's that's what's going on here.
Objectifying the subjective nature of the client.
Yeah, exactly. Is that Jung or is that Jeffrey Wolfe Green?
I think Jeffrey might have grabbed
quoting
Jung. I'm not sure, but I know he did share that quote. I just don't know where he got it. I think it was Jung though.
So, and just think about what this means as a counselor or a psychoanalyst. Not 8th house point of view, but from a 7th house point of view, you're listening. And you're listening and you're observing. You're taking in everything on a higher level of conscious. This is a higher level of listening, right? Normal listening, you listen to someone, quote unquote normal. Conventional listening, it's maybe not, might be superficial. Higher level listening, you're hearing everything as actually reflecting an archetypal dynamic, right? You're hearing needs, you're hearing a person expressing their feelings, and it's not just taking on a literal face value. you're hearing everything as reflecting universal archetypal dynamics that are working itself out within the psyche. So it's like bringing a higher level of intelligence to the art of listening and counseling by really recognizing the archetypal patterns that we play out. Um, yeah, his ability to even work with astrology in the context of counseling and working with people as well. It's using archetypal symbology to understand the workings of other people. This is a higher intelligence of listening. It's a beautiful example of that.
Yeah.
And again, his contribution and Freud's to just like astrology and everything that we know when it comes to counseling and psychoanalysis, like his contribution to that whole field is it's so integrated that people don't even realize it. Like we borrow terms and concepts from him that are just all over the place now. Obama. We've looked at his chart a lot, but it's worth speaking to. He has Uranus on the North Node. Do you want to speak to this?
You can. I'll jump in.
Okay.
You picked
So,
him. So.
okay. I also picked Yoko Ono, but that was vetoed. Also
I
because
totally vetoed that one.
yeah, I'm also a little bit sick of talking about Yoko Ono. Okay, so I'm not really sick of it, to be honest. It's more like I just want to feel like I'm fresh and I'm coming at these things from an authentic moment, present moment place. Okay, so South Node in Aquarius in the first house, but this is ruled by Uranus on the North Node. When you have a situation like that where the ruler of the South Node is on the North Node, yes, it means that planetary function has been developed and processed for a long time. They're meant to continue with that, but in particular, there's an added evolutionary emphasis to really keep the attention on the North Node. Because there is, since it rules the South Node, there's a possibility of this sort of kind of catalyzing the soul back into the South Node. So there's a strong emphasis here on that North Node Uranus conjunction, which means a core piece of liberation here is entering into a relationship where the ability to listen, honor equality, honor differences, is not met with compromise or with the egalitarian need to make sure everyone is accepted, everything works for everyone else, or a trust of friendship and equality that ends up resulting in Uranus 7th house, people shocking or surprising on the basis of them not being what they've presented themselves to be. Or other motives. Uranus in the 7th, in this case, can correspond to the interests of other political groups, the other side of the aisle, other partisan political groups that have their own agendas. And one thing he endeavored to do a lot of is trying to harmonize with, Republicans with Democrats. He had a all Democrat majority Senate here in the United States, but he still really gave a lot of space for Republican voices. And there's a lot of criticism that he didn't get as much done as he could have because he was trying so hard to be a good friend, right?
Totally, yeah.
And a part of that is the trauma and the memory of that Uranus ruling that South Node. Well, if I'm going to do that, people are going to be against me, and there's going to be trauma and violence, and I don't want to do that, and I have a family. Like, I think there's a core subconscious memory of sudden violent endings relative to that square to the IC and the moon. I don't want to leave my family. I don't want to terminate my purpose early on. And so I'm going to sort of enact a sort of emotional duplicity, pretend to be something that I'm not, which I think he was really good at and skilled at, for the sake of creating peace and sort of appeasing the enemy. In traditional astrology, the enemy is 7th house as well, which I've always found very interesting. But it's the idea of the other with the other party, right? I can understand that perspective. I'm not one to judge. In some ways, I can see how that was relevant and evolutionary for his soul. But I think there was a significant amount of suppression. And I can imagine just a significant amount of suppression of his core needs and his core values in order to harmonize in the ways that he wanted to. And my personal perspective, even to this day, I don't see him according to my inner sense of his soul and who he is as a soul, I don't see him very vocal or active in terms of really supporting the true individuality of the groups and the freedom that I would see is he has done many things, including like what is it? He's the one that pardoned. No, he didn't pardon. Did he pardon? Who is that person, that transgender woman in jail? I forgot her name. He supported Standing Rock, but only like just at the
Yeah.
very end of his term in presidency, right? There are certain ways where it's just like I wonder the extent to which he's dissociated from that just because it works and it keeps the peace, but he doesn't want to create conflict.
Yeah,
Your thoughts?
I think he's an incredibly likable guy, and he was what I think this country needed at that time. Of course, he's half black, half white, so it's just more inclusive, and bringing in other cultures into that picture. But you're right. I think the challenge with when there's trauma in this, with that Uranus in the seventh house, and you're trying to be all things to all people, it's just not possible. And there's only it is actually, you become frozen because you don't want to upset these people over here or those people over there, so you just aren't able to really deliver the hammer when sometimes the hammer is necessary.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Biden is a Scorpio. Biden's a Scorpio. He's been trying to work on the compromise, but I feel like he's pulling out the hammer right now.
Oh, is he?
Oh yeah.
Be interesting to look at it.
He's definitely, I mean, we're coming into midterms this November, and he's going to be going for it. He's, because obviously, the MAGA party, the Trump party, Republicans aren't even recognizable anymore. Majority of them, at least the people that voted, for Trump, because the whole, everything that party's become is not what it once was. So, Biden's not going to hold back. We're going to lose our democracy if people don't wake up. I mean, that's what he's not going to hold back or, edit what he says anymore. Mark my word.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That'd be
He's
interesting.
Scorpio. So he was the vice
And
president.
he probably wants the liberal vote too, because elections are coming up, so he needs to kind of be more out there.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But
Well, one thing with Obama is there's been a lot of criticism that he's been too centrist.
yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And with that Uranus North Node, it's like there's a lot of like trying to play the game, but suppressing a whole lot. And I'm
Yeah.
very curious about like the inner workings of his soul and kind of where maybe he settled or what his higher orientation or perspective. And there's like the wisdom where it's like you can't change consensus reality all at once, but you gotta be radical sometimes too.
Yeah,
So
that's a great,
yeah.
that's a perfect thing to say. You got to be radical sometimes. Yeah. That's a Uranus thing to say. Now, there's something I want to share, if it's okay.
Yeah.
This Uranus book by Jeff Green. This thing is so old, it's like falling apart. If you don't have it, and it goes through Uranus through the houses and signs. It's a great book. And I just wanted to read something because I don't want to try and use my, my memory here. But you talked about the word liberation as a Uranian word, right? So if you have Uranus in the seventh, and this kind of reminds you a little bit of what you're talking about in some respects with Obama, but this is addressing some of the things we said. So Jeff Green says, liberation with Uranus in the seventh house, or Libra, occurs when the individual stops comparing him or herself to others, in the sense of using others as standards to judge his or her own overall life condition, positively or negatively. Liberation occurs when the individual learns to define his or her own unique values, lifestyle, and way of being in relationship, and does not adopt another's ways because of individual or social pressure to do so. Liberation occurs when the individual learns to differentiate between what is being subjectively projected upon another's reality and the actual reality of the others. Once learned, liberation occurs by learning to accept the inherent differences that exist between all people relative to the essential natures of each person. Once this acceptance is extended, liberation occurs by not expecting everyone to be the same, or expecting others to simply know what the individual needs, to just know what and who he is or she is. And liberation occurs by remaining centered within the unique reality that characterizes the totality of the individual in all social and relationship situations, and not changing or adopting ideas, values, beliefs, or lifestyles of others because of the social or relationship security that results by not being different. Boom.
Boom. So well said.
Boom, boom. I mean, boom. Hello.
So
It's just
nice.
like, and you know what? Fitting in is overrated also.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, it is. It gets old. It gets boring. What, I mean, and so that Uranus and Libra, seventh house people. So anyway, that was a fun ride, Ari. Loved it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for joining us. And we'll continue next month with Uranus in 8th house or Scorpio.